For 10,000 years, farming started the same way: you turn the soil over. The plow was the very symbol of agriculture, carved into coins and coats of arms. Now, across hundreds of millions of acres, farmers are parking the plow for good and planting straight into last year's stubble. Here is why one of the oldest habits in human history is being abandoned. To understand why this is such a big deal, you have to understand how total the plow's reign was. For almost the entire history of settled farming, turning the soil was simply what farming meant. A clean, dark, freshly plowed field was the picture of a good farmer at work. Plowing buried the weeds chopped in the old crop and left a soft, level seedbed. Questioning it felt a little like questioning the wheel. The logic seemed solid, but every pass of the plow does three quiet kinds of damage, and once you can measure them, that tidy field starts to look very expensive. The problem is that the plow treats the soil as dead material to be rearranged, when in fact it is a living system, and shredding it every year has consequences that do not show up until you go looking. The first cost is erosion. Bare, broken-up soil has nothing holding it down. When heavy rain hits or the wind picks up, the finest, richest particles wash and blow away first. That topsoil took centuries to build, and it does not come back in a hurry. Fields that stop plowing typically lose between 50 and 90% less soil, because the surface stays armored with residue instead of lying open and exposed. The second cost is invisible. Soil is one of the largest stores of carbon on the planet, locked up in decayed roots and organic matter. Every time a plow slices the soil open and folds it over, it feeds a rush of oxygen to that buried carbon, and a pulse of it escapes into the air as carbon dioxide. Leave the soil closed and undisturbed, and far more of that carbon stays down in the ground where it quietly builds fertility. The third cost is money you can watch tick away on the diesel gauge. Dragging heavy steel through an entire field is one of the most fuel-hungry things a tractor ever does, and conventional tillage takes several passes before a seed ever goes in. Farmers who switch to no-till commonly cut their fuel use by half or more, and they make far fewer trips across the field, which slashes labor and wear on the machinery. Across the United States alone, no-till is estimated to save hundreds of millions of gallons of diesel every single year. So how do you plant a seed into ground you never turned over? The tool is called a no-till drill. Instead of a plow, it rides on rows of sharp discs that slice a narrow slot straight through the old residue, drop the seed at exactly the right depth, and press the slot closed again behind them. The field is barely disturbed. From the road, it can look like nothing was planted at all, right up until the new crop pushes up in neat green rows through the pale stubble. That leftover stubble is not mess to be ashamed of. It is a working blanket. It shades the soil so far less water evaporates in the heat. It softens the blow of raindrops so the surface does not seal into a hard crust. And as it slowly rots down, it feeds the earthworms and microbes underneath. Over a few seasons, no-till fields can hold 20 to 30% more water, which is the difference between a crop that survives a dry spell and one that fails. Under a field that is left alone, life returns fast. Earthworms, which a plow chops up and exposes to birds, multiply and drive tunnels deep into the ground. Those tunnels let rain soak in instead of running off, and let roots dive deeper for water. Fungal threads that a plow tears apart every year are allowed to knit the soil into crumbs. The soil literally changes texture, from something you fight to something that works with you. None of this is free. The plow was also a weeding tool, and without it, farmers lean harder on herbicides and on cover crops to keep weeds in check. The soil warms up more slowly in spring under all that residue, which can delay planting in cold northern regions. And the very first years can be genuinely bumpy, because the soil biology has to rebuild after decades of being turned over. That is the part that scares people off. A field that has been plowed for generations does not become a healthy no-till field overnight. Yields can dip or wobble for a season or two while the soil structure, the worms, and the microbes re-establish themselves. Farmers who lose their nerve during that window quit and conclude no-till simply does not work. The ones who push through almost always report that the ground gets a little easier and a little more forgiving every year that follows. No-till is not a magic switch that suits every farm. Heavy, poorly drained clay soils in cold, wet climates can struggle, staying waterlogged and cold under the residue when they badly need to dry and warm up. Some farmers use a halfway approach, called reduced or strip tillage, disturbing only the narrow band where the seed will go and leaving the rest untouched. The point is not purity. It is disturbing the soil as little as the crop and the climate will allow. Add it all up and the appeal becomes obvious. Less fuel, less labor, less erosion, more water banked in the ground, and carbon kept in the soil instead of the sky. As diesel gets more expensive and droughts get sharper and more frequent, the arithmetic keeps tilting further away from the plow. What looked like a fringe idea for cranks a generation ago is now standard practice across enormous stretches of the world's farmland, and the area grows every year. The plow gave us 10,000 years of harvests, but it was always quietly borrowing against the soil. No, till as farmers finally learning to stop digging up the very foundation they depend on.